Hello, dear viewers. Welcome to this edition of the News in English on Rwanda Television. My name is Sarah Hore. Let us begin with the headlines. President Paul Kagame is in Brazzaville for the inauguration ceremony of President-elect Denis Sassou Nguesso. Rwanda's Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations has pointed out that the security problems in the Great Lakes region have persisted because their root causes are not being addressed. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. On Wednesday afternoon, His Excellency the President of the Republic, Paul Kagame, arrived in Brazzaville for Thursday's inauguration ceremony of President-elect Denis Sassou Nguesso of the Republic of Congo. The President was received by Prime Minister Anatole Colline Makosso. President Denis Sassou Nguesso was re-elected for a fifth term in office with 94.82% of the vote in the first round of the presidential elections held last month in that country. Now, as we noted in the headlines, Rwanda's Deputy Permanent Representative to the UN, that is Robert Kayinamura, has delivered the country's statement at the body's Security Council meeting on the Peace, Security and Cooperation Framework for the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Great Lakes region. In his intervention, the Deputy Permanent Representative reiterated Rwanda's consistent commitment to the framework since 2013. And the need for full good faith implementation by all parties. He questioned its implementation as exemplified by the persistent hate speech against Rwandophone communities and reminded council members of Rwanda's security and existential threat posed by the persistent presence of the terrorist group that calls itself the FDLR, and also reiterated Rwanda's commitment to the Washington Peace Agreement and support for the Doha Framework for Peace.
Path to peace without its effective and irreversible neutralization. This issue has been consistently raised in our engagements with all special envoys, past and present, the Secretariat, the Security Council, and in all forums that are mediating for peace. Peace in DRC and peace in the region are inseparable. Selective implementation and selective accountability will not deliver results.
Now to matters here at home, and on those, operating in Rwanda's industrial parks say that they have not yet been able to fully use their capacity to increase production because they are still hindered by inadequate infrastructure, while some of the existing infrastructure is not properly functioning. They say this was also the same conclusion reached by the Senate Committee on Economy and Finance after visiting the industrial parks. One of the major problems in the industrial parks is that some residents are still living there and have not yet been relocated. The challenges slowing down the function of the industrial parks were also pointed out by the Senate Committee on Economy and Finance after touring different industrial parks across the country. On that basis, the committee asked the industry department in the Private Sector Federation what should be done to resolve them. An official from the department, Joel Mbabazi, explained that the management of industrial parks is currently fragmented, with some managed by the Private Sector Federation, others by the Rwanda Development Board, others still by the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and some are even managed by districts, which makes the repair and maintenance of infrastructure difficult. Rwanda has 11 industrial parks, which were supposed to be developed so that investors could operate in them. However, the Office of the Auditor General has found that this has not been done as planned. During their visit, the senators toured industrial parks in Huye, Muhanga, and Nyagatare districts. They found that some lacked basic infrastructure such as roads, that in some places factories had been built without assessing their environmental impact, and that in other parks, residents had not yet been relocated. Now, under the second phase of the National Strategy for Transformation, industrial output is expected to increase by between 10.2 and 12.7%. Rwanda's Minister of Defense has assured genocide survivors that advocacy efforts will continue to preserve the Musanze District Memorial at the former Ruhengeri Court of Appeal. This was stated during a commemoration event honoring more than 800 Tutsi who were killed at the location. Gladys Benimana has the details.
Inside a room at the Musanze District Memorial, Bridget Umuhoza shows us photos of her family members who were killed at the Ruhengeri Court of Appeal. They had taken refuge there after being brought from different communes and were promised safety. Bridget, the only survivor among more than 800 Tutsi who were killed by Interahamwe militia, recounts how they were attacked. We were being protected by the police at that time, but they were the ones who eventually abandoned us. Among them was one who had taken me as his wife. He told me that the plan to kill us was still ongoing and advised me to find a way to escape. He helped me get out through a small path above Muhabura that led toward the airport and then to the stadium. From there, I started moving, searching for a way, hiding among my neighbors. I would hear the Interahamwe militia arriving in vehicles, chanting and mobilizing. They came and fired many bullets and used machetes to kill in the place I had fled from. They would even take infants and smash them against walls. So far, the Musanze District Memorial, which was formerly the Ruhengeri Court of Appeal, continues to be preserved. However, from the perspective of survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi, there are still aspects they believe need continued attention. As a district memorial, there are many things that are not yet included, such as historical markers, and it could be expanded so that it becomes a place where people can sit and feel comfortable. This court, where I also testified before it was turned into a memorial, I appreciate that they valued the testimony I gave. We request that they continue to preserve it, add more historical information, and complete what has not yet been finished. The president of Ibuka in Musanze district, Festus Twizere Rusisiro, notes that commemorating the Tutsi who were killed at Ruhengeri Court of Appeal carries great significance. The killings that took place in this court, in this justice building, have never happened anywhere else in Rwanda or in the world. This is a sign that the history of this place must be preserved not only at the district level, but also through collaboration with the entire country and the justice institutions. We also feel that it could become a museum of history, especially focusing on the failure of justice. The Minister of Defense, Juvenal Mariza Munda, who joined residents of Musanze along with other leaders, assured survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi that the Musanze District Memorial will continue to be preserved. He also urged both the youth and adults to continue promoting unity among Rwandans and to fight against genocide ideology. We should expand this place so that it becomes a site where this event is commemorated. We are seeking a solution for it, and we should all promote Rwanda, because this is a tool that will continue to help us strengthen our unity and build the Rwanda we want, a Rwanda free of genocide ideology, free of discrimination, and free of division. During the commemoration of the Tutsi who were killed at the Ruhengeri Court of Appeal, a ceremony was held in which flowers were laid on the Mukungwa River in honor of those who were killed there. Flowers were also laid at the burial site of victims of the genocide against the Tutsi.
On Wednesday at Ntarama in Bugesera district, people remembered the victims of the genocide against the Tutsi and also laid to rest 153 bodies of victims which were found in the sectors of Ngogo, Nyamata, Mayanje, Musenyi, and Ntarama. Those who attended the event first observed a moment of silence in remembrance of the victims, especially those buried at the Ntarama Genocide Memorial. 148 of the victims buried at the event were found in Ngogo sector alone. The representative of Ibuka at the ceremony, speaking about the importance of commemoration in fostering the unity of Rwandans, also asked those who still hold genocidal ideologies to keep them to themselves. The Minister of State in the Ministry of ICT and Innovation, Yves Radukunda, on his part, asked those who have information about where the bodies of victims are to provide it instead of remaining silent. The Ntarama Memorial in Bugesera district of the Eastern Province is the final resting place of more than 5,000 bodies of victims of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Now, during the commemoration event held in Rusororo sector at the Ruhanga Memorial on Wednesday, 15 bodies found in 4 nearby sectors were laid to rest. Survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi in Gasabo district, in areas that were formerly part of Gikoro commune, have noted that commemorating helps them remember the ordeal that the Tutsi who had sought refuge on the hill went through and the humiliating death they suffered after being found in the Ruhanga Anglican Church. The president of Ibuka, Dr. Philbert Gakwenzire, praised the bravery of the RPF in Hotanyi, which resulted in some Tutsi surviving, even though the killers had intended to wipe them all out. The Minister of State in the Ministry of Infrastructure, Ambassador Jean de Dieu Wihanganye, observed that the survivors of the genocide showed courage by forgiving those who killed their loved ones and called for the Ndumunya Rwanda program to be embraced by all. The Ruhanga Memorial Site is the final resting place of more than 37,000 victims of the genocide against the Tutsi. It was formerly an Anglican church where Tutsi from the former communes of Gikoro, Gikomero, Rubungo, and Bichumbi, as well as other places, had sought refuge and were later killed. Now, survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi have commended the bravery and sacrifice of the RPF in Hotanyi soldiers who rescued them and restored their hope to live and rebuild their lives. We have the details with Adams Kwizera.
Often at the end of the testimonies from survivors of the genocide against Tutsi, a phrase is heard expressing how they were saved from the hands of the killers. After going through immense suffering, survivors were ultimately rescued by the RPA in Hotanyi.
To say that when we saw the Inhotanyi, we saw life is something we truly meant, because the moment we saw them, we felt alive again. During that painful journey, we saw the Inhotanyi near the area around KBC at the time when the Presidential Guard of Habyarimana was shooting at us. Then we saw the Inhotanyi coming from the CND, telling us, "Be calm." Seeing them was like regaining life. The Inhotanyi gathered us together and took us in.
Inhotanyi Ziaza is a phrase that also holds a deep meaning for those who were on the front lines, rescuing and saving lives. Brigadier General Dr. Bitega Jean-Paul, who served as a doctor during the struggle, says that the phrase brings back many memories.
When our parents say the Inhotanyi came, it also meant a lot to us, because at the time, many of us were young. We all took the same path with one goal ahead of us, to go and save people who were our parents and our relatives. So it was necessary for us to give ourselves fully without holding anything back.
The story of the RPA in Hotanyi dates back to December 28, 1993, when 600 RPA soldiers arrived in Kigali to protect 28 politicians of RPF in Hotanyi, who had come to implement parts of the Arusha Peace Accords. These agreements include power-sharing arrangements within the broad-based transitional government that was expected to be established in January 1994. Residents of Kigali recall that when they first saw Inhotanyi arriving in the city, they regained hope.
We believed that the problem was going to be resolved because they had come for negotiations and had agreed that RPF and its forces would be integrated with government forces and that the ministerial and parliamentary positions would be shared. We saw this as a significant step forward.
However, a few months later, the genocide against Tutsi began, as government forces under Habyarimana executed a long-prepared plan. When the genocide started, The RP Ngotanyi quickly moved to rescue those being killed, particularly in areas near former CND and across Kigali, as explained by Tito Rutarimara.
noneho n'impunzi zimwe zitangira kuza izibonye ko zihisha zikaza zidusanga hariya. Some refugees immediately began arriving, finding ways to hide as they came, and they were treated in the sick bay from the very first day, where assistance also started being provided to them. Meanwhile, we were still waiting for the support to arrive.
During this struggle to liberate the country and stop the genocide against Tutsi, some of those who were rescued chose to join RP Ngotanyi in the struggle.
There was nothing else I could give to the Inhotanyi. After they gave me life, I felt I had to give them mine in return. I immediately joined the army because my father and mother had already been killed and I had nothing left. The only thing I had was to stand with the Inhotanyi and dedicate my life to them. I fought with that determination to join others in stopping the genocide and saving lives. And we succeeded.
Beyond the campaign against the genocide against Tutsi, the former RP Ngotanyi soldiers continued their mission under the Rwanda Defense Force, RDF, which today plays a key role in ensuring the country's security and development. Adams Kwizera, RwandaTV News.
Now to business matters. Rwanda's stock market is often viewed as complex, risky, and reserved for a select few. But is that really the case? William Evans Mutabazi sat down with Diana Musoni of BK Capital to unpack what it truly takes, that is, to start investing and how returns are made. She also addressed key concerns around regulation, investor protection, and liquidity in the growing market. Here's a sneak peek ahead of the full episode of Capital Market Bridge Shora, airing on Thursday.
I've always heard that stock market is complex, it's risky, it's reserved for a specific group of people. From where you see it, do you hear such conversations quite often? What sort of misconceptions are around the stock market that young people need to know today?
Absolutely. So we do hear a lot of investors walk in and they think that you should have an amount of money, a certain amount of money to start investing in the stock exchange, which is not true. So with the stock exchange, the risky part is basically how volatile the market is, so which would not really apply on our stock exchange. Our Rwanda Stock Exchange is still growing. It's been there for a few years, and not so many people are very aware of what the stock exchange does. So for a stock, it's basically having a share in a company. And there are two ways in which you can earn on the stock exchange or in shares. So the first one is what we call capital gain. So one would ask, what is capital gain? So if I'm buying a stock today of BK, and the price right now is at 460 francs. 460 francs. So if you're buying, the minimal amount of shares is 100. So that would be 46,000, right? You can start with as little as 46,000. And if the price in 6 months now goes up to 480, already the value of the stock that you hold has gone up, right? And if you were to sell the stock, you would now get it for 2,000 more than what you initially paid for. And the second one is dividends. The dividends is basically if a company has made their profit, and of course they have to pay their shareholders because that's why you injected the money in the business. They pay you every year. Sometimes there's a special dividend called an interim, which is paid in December. So the risk would be the same way we are earning on the share is the same way we can lose. So the stock could drop, the price could drop from 460 to like 420, and the value has dropped. And if the company does not make a profit, then it will not pay dividends. So those are the risks that are into shares, we usually classify it as a high-risk investment, but you can start as little as less than 50,000, really. Yeah.
In part of what you're saying, one, there's too much math for a first timer, but also I think there raises questions. Of course, if it is involving money, if it is involving exchanges, buying and getting this, there are questions around regulation, there are questions around liquidity, there are questions around protection. In the sense of, let's say someone has bought 100 shares from BK where you sit. What does regulation or investor protection and liquidity now mean to them? What does it look like?
So basically, those are three different components. So there's liquidity and then there's investor protection. Let me just classify investor protection. So the investor is already protected by us, the broker. So we are supposed to be performing at your best interest. So whenever we have your order, we're supposed to execute it in your best interest, in the client's best interest, whether they're buying or selling. And we are regulated by the capital markets and also the stock exchange. So we cannot make you go into a loss if the price of the stock is already, on the market. So we're supposed to execute it as the client wants. And in terms of liquidity, our stock exchange is still growing. So we have a lot of investors who sometimes suffer from lack of liquidity. So I'll give an example for now. There are two stocks, so Brightwa, Beka, their demand is really, really high and the supply is a bit low. So people hold, when they buy, they hold. So for now, the investors that we have seen are investors that buy to hold rather than buy and trade, right? So sometimes the supply could be extremely low and the demand really high, and that could affect the liquidity or even vice versa. So some stocks like MTN, the supply has been really, really high and the demand has been low. So it just varies on the stock, basically, yes.
A pleasure as always that you're able to join us for this edition. Until next time, it is goodbye from me.